Welcome to the Sales Compensation Show, where we share the latest sales performance insights through in-depth discussion with experts. Season 3 of our show is your backstage pass to discovering how today's most successful sales and revenue ops teams support go-to-market strategy and improve sales performance. Plus, we'll explore what we can learn about incentives from different industries more broadly. Subscribe to hear how leaders are unlocking new growth, implementing the latest compensation trends, and their priorities for improving go-to-market performance. I'm your host, CEO of Form AI, Nabeil Alazzam. Betsy, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invite. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I always ask this because it is a very unique space. None of us woke up when we were kids thinking that we were going to get here. So would love to hear more about your background, your career, and how you ended up in the world of sales ops.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely accidental. And I very much agree with the comment. Nobody wakes up and really says that this is my career path. I started my career early days in sales, food and beverage sales, actually, really early back. I used to stock the shelves at grocery stores and things with Coca-Cola products, and eventually worked my way up sales leader. I was a sales leader for many years. And I was given an opportunity to join a large tech organization several years ago. Took that opportunity, really had a passion and love for tech, and turned into sales operations and running various different disciplines across sales operations for that tech organization, and bloomed into a really great opportunity with my current company, GitHub, where I lead global revenue operations and enablement, and really enjoying it thus far. I've been here about 10 months and would have never thought I would be here probably 20 years ago. I probably would have enjoyed the path that I was on at the time, but no, really enjoying it. And by accident, I'm here. Coming from the world of sales or being customer facing to start and then kind of entering sales, how have the learnings that you had in your previous world been brought over? That's a really great question. I think my prior history as a sales leader and executive really complement sales and revenue operations, because I know what I needed to be a successful sales leader. And now I'm in the position to be able to have that and deliver that to my sales counterparts. And it really helped me in that role. Little did I know I would be in revenue operations later, knowing and having that experience to understand the art of the deal, the tools, the power of the team and the stakeholders outside of sales to be successful. And so I can be a better partner now, understanding what sales leaders need and expect.
Yeah, 100%. It's not always just the data telling a story, and it's not always just the qualitative aspect. It's like the merging is what makes it truly unique. I guess from the array of different industries that you've worked within, I guess what are the common threads versus, and what are the things that are like truly differentiating and extreme? I'm curious.
Yes.
Given the range that you've undertaken over your career?
So common threads would be, just the infrastructure of revenue operations or a sales organization. Most organizations operate relatively the same. You have your sales team, you have your finance team, you have your revenue operations team or sales operations team. That is pretty much by and large the same across the organizations that I have worked with. Where there's large differentiations across the different industries that I've had would be the type of sale and the way to go to market in that sale. So, for example, in food and beverage, it can be very tactical. Yes, there are some strategic pieces to the sale, thinking your hyper mass industries there, looking at large organizations such as mass grocery stores and things like that, a much more strategic sale. And other than that, it is a tactical sale. It's going in, independent restaurateurs, small chains, regional concepts. It's very different from tech. And at tech, you can have that. You have startups, you have digital natives, you have mid-markets that, can be more tactical sometimes. However, large enterprises are really what is consuming the majority of the tech. And so with that, that's where it's different. It's the type of sale, the segmentation of the sale, and the sales plays in motion that go into closing the more complex sales as you move along.
In the world of field sales, like in the food industry or beverage industry, the reps showing up, being present, almost like the FaceTime that they're there. borders a little bit on marketing strategy versus tech, where, that face time and presence is not done, especially for prospects, is not done purely with a seller. It's done by these other things. So I think being in the kind of the revenue operations side of things versus purely in just the world of sales, I guess, is that a good way to kind of describe how you think about deploying, or like the differences in terms of how capital is deployed in organizations like the food industry versus pure tech?
It is. Yeah, actually, that's a really good framework that you just outlined. So, in food and beverage, again, it's very tactical, it's transactional, it is feet on the street, not,
Yeah.
knocking on doors. Food and beverage, I would say, is actually not until around 2021 was it really accelerated into the digital age. Lots of improvements over the last 20
Yeah.
years, for sure, and what I was able to witness. However, when I was still in food and beverage, it was very common that they had routes. Account managers had actual routes and going to collect orders, and customers didn't really want to adopt digital platforms just yet. And so very, very transactional and in relationship as well because of
Yeah.
that. Up until about 2021, when COVID forced us to do digital motions, right? It forced restaurants to go and create apps and have customers order digitally, and the really vast transformation of that industry into delivery and all those things that come with that. Whereas we're in tech right now, it is a different, coordinated. You're not knocking on doors. Some tech organizations are fully virtual and remote. And so there's, a much more, I would say, a complex and calculated sales cycle. But with that, you do have to deploy your resources, headcount, and map to that accordingly. So in short, yes, you're spot on. It's a very different sell. So with that, our revenue operations need to look at those motions, or me being from a different industry, look at those very differently than the same.
Yeah. And so then if you think about, and maybe this is jumping into the world of comp a little bit, if you think about how the way you incentivize teams and how you've seen that kind of in the different selling motions, even though the org structures, I would agree, like are tend to be relatively similar. What are the biggest differences that you've seen?
So, um, some of the biggest differences I have seen in prior industries, they tend to be they were at one point 100% commission based, no base compensation. And we're here in
Yeah.
tech and the organizations that I've worked for, it's a different structure, right? Because of the sales cycle, how quickly they sell, the churn, the adoption of product, and it's different in the sense that it's not 100% commission in most tech organizations, at least the ones that I've worked for. And so with that, you have to build those compensation plans to be, definitely drive incentive and result, drive excitement for the products that you're selling, versus where in a commission-based world, 100% commission, the seller can write their own history and an output, so to speak, with compensation because there's not the framework that there is around incentives and spiffs and base pay. So it definitely is different between the two different industries.
I've seen this across many customers to date, but because of the tactile element or like the in-person client relationship that occurs in some of the industries where it is predominantly field sales, it's having your presence at the customer site, there's a bigger fear of changing comp structures because the belief is that, oh, the ownership of that customer relationship sits purely in the hands of the seller versus actually being something where we want to hold them accountable. One, I'm curious of how much it resonates, and then kind of the most extreme example of this, that you've seen, and how you kind of course corrected something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will tell you this, have absolutely went through compensation change management. And I'll give you a really good example. In a prior organization, we had reps that would lose volume or a customer, and they wouldn't go out and really hunt for new business. Instead, they would just raise the price on remaining customers to help subsidize that loss in commission. There was really at the point no incentive for them to find new business because they could effectively tax their current existing base to stay whole in their own personal compensation, right? With the 100% compensation plan. So at this organization, I was tapped to lead a pilot to help overhaul this because what was happening is sellers obviously had no incentive to go get those new cases. Meanwhile, the company was attriting in revenue and volume, right?
Yep.
Because they were losing those cases and not getting more. So what we did is we moved away from that commissioning model and we structured a plan with three strategic buckets to help drive the things that also helped the company grow. One being a new business and volume bucket, so rewarding that hunt specifically. Two was account penetration. So in incentivizing land and expand motion. So now you've got the new account, let's go get additional cases or categories across those accounts. And three was very high margin private label product. So aligning reps payouts with companies' most profitable products.
Yep.
And what happened is what we were able to identify was a massive change management lift. That's huge. The actually, quite frankly, the industry had always been 100% commission based for many, many years. And so we had to provide sellers really a clear business case on how they could make more, which was very possible by selling value rather than just adjusting price in their CRM tools. So through that process, we did communication. My market was actually one of the first pilots to market the approach or pilot the approach. And we saw double-digit sales increase, incremental revenue, and a fundamental shift in the sales culture from that price administrator, just go mark up a couple cases here, to driving true transformational growth for the organization. So it wasn't easy. There was complexities in some of the other
Yep.
markets where they took different approaches or piloted slightly different models on communication. But I think it's bringing the team along. It's having change agents. So I took some of my top sellers, brought them in, went through in very granular detail how they could make more money. And it was a great success. And to date, the organization still uses that model. And other industry leaders have also adopted that model now. So it is very common across the industry that I came from originally that they're on a similar type model now.
Yeah, I mean, you have to rip the Band-Aid to kind of make these correction changes. And I think the comp plan is a mathematical device, right? The incentives that you put together, they're business rules, but ultimately getting people bought into, as you said, is a really critical part. I'm curious how much, like, when you think about change management, you think about, okay, like bringing a sales team along, and you touch on like bringing that advocates, the people that are going to advocate. Maybe I'll come back to that. How do you think about change management when it comes to the senior leadership that is nervous about the numbers going sideways, or some big blow up happening because of the cultural impact that a plan like this could drive?
Yeah. Um, I absolutely think the math is the easy part. You can build a perfect spreadsheet, but if a rep doesn't trust that, they really won't execute on it.
Yeah.
And, I think I've learned this through a couple different opportunities in my career. We've had teams that trust, for example, their 100% commission-based model with total pricing autonomy, but when they lose a customer, they didn't hunt, for example. And so with that, you have to show them the story as to what's in it for them and for them to be successful and for them to make money, because that is why sellers come to work, right?
Yeah.
That's why we all come to work, is for, fair compensation. And so with that, it's getting complete stakeholder buy-in across your entire set of stakeholders, not just the sellers. They are high impact, obviously, but sales leaders to be confident to talk about the changes and adjustment in compensation plans, and your highest level, within your own C-suite or your revenue teams, understanding they understand the impacts of compensation changes and the potential risks to compensation changes. Does it drive attrition? Does it drive different behaviors? Does it drive unintended outcomes? And really vetting those through as best as possible. But I think hands down, communication is key in any large change or when it impacts somebody financially. And then following up. So where there's opportunities to pulse check to make sure the plan has landed as intended, very important to do that versus send it full ship to that plan and never come back to it.
Yeah.
I think a full complete cycle or flywheel of communication and follow up is critical so you earn trust for future changes as well. So
100%. And I think it's so easy to not do the follow-ups and the checks because it's compensation. It's like a taboo, difficult subject to talk about. But I think, really following up and checking in the team, people still believe that they can make that money. They have clarity. It's so important.
Very agreeable there. And I think too, if you can go back and circle back and say, look at how this was successful, or even letting
Yeah.
the sellers lead that conversation, like we amongst their peers, like, yeah, we're making more money. Nothing outweighs that. And it really helps, dissolve any trust or lack of trust in compensation changes.
Yeah, 100%. Just to double click there, are you a fan of like open leaderboards for sellers?
I am
Yeah.
actually. So I used to call it TRP, track rank post.
Yeah.
So, but yes, I am actually very open especially was when I was a sales leader in driving healthy competition. It's never to, bag on anyone, but rather it's to drive healthy competition. And I
Yeah.
think a bit of ownership and pride and team culture. So I am a big fan of open leaderboards for sales performance cases, things like that. Um, I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the data shows it's definitely very impactful, especially if you do it where you kind of, I'm curious, if you've seen this, but if you break it up into cohorts where people are not just competing with number one, two, and three, because they might be way out of the running for that, but within their cohort or their group, how they're ranking. When you're thinking about a comp plan change, I guess like what are the mistakes that you've seen senior leadership make when it comes to trying to fix an issue and just deploying a new comp plan to address that issue.
Um, I would say trying to use a comp plan to fix a non-compensation problem. So, for example, if your product doesn't have a market fit or your reps haven't been enabled to sell the value, doubling the commission really isn't going to help.
Yep.
And so you just end up with a really frustrated team and a high cost of sales. I think the other mistake that I have seen is complexity bloat, is what I'll affectionately call it. But if a rep needs a calculator to figure out which lead is worth their time, what the complexity of the plan is, you've already lost. I'm a firm believer that really a three bucket max is a rule for a compensation plan. If you can't explain your comp plan on a napkin in 30 seconds or so, it's really not an incentive. It's really just a complex math problem. So as simplified that as you can to articulate impact and what's in it for the team is best.
Yeah. I really love what you said around which lead is worth their time. Because everyone says, okay, if they can't explain on a napkin, which is like table stakes.
Yeah,
But interestingly, the translation, what you want to ultimately happen is they understand the incentives as simple as a napkin, but then they can very easily translate that to where they allocate their time.
that's
And
right.
I think sometimes you do have that disconnect because there's a bunch of stuff that happens up here that is not always connected to the outcome because of the way the crediting rules sit or like how the allocation of sales effort or sales process down the line, which I think every time you create like that opaqueness, you've just made it fuzzier and harder for someone to prioritize and get the sense of urgency of where they need to act. So yeah.
Very much agree.
Yeah.
Those would be my faux pas of compensation, though, and then I
Yeah.
think as well the non-compensation complexity. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, you're trying to add a spiff, just add a spiff, and it's like, oh, spiffs
Yeah.
don't always drive the outcome unless it's tied
Well,
appropriately.
I mean, especially yeah, if if you overspiff, then you basically make the culture de fact depend on spiffs to move the needle. Um, and this goes back to kind of the three pillars. Like the moment you start over incentivizing in some ways, you've actually just taken attention off of those three pillars, and now you've made it not three but seven pillars, and there's a problem. Um, it's funny because I feel like the best use spiffs are almost ones where you test the waters of a new metric or KPI that you want to deploy, and you give it out, you energize the organization around that KPI, you demonstrate you can make money, and now it becomes something you can deploy the following year. And it's a great change management tactic. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
And without the larger risk of impacting, the entire sales organization, for example, or understanding where the plan may fall short within a spiff, it gives
exactly.
you those lighter guardrails.
Yeah,
Agreed.
100%. And I guess I'm curious when you think about, again, change management, changing comp plans, um, what are the time scales that you're thinking about?
So I've seen it depends on the organization that I've worked for. I've seen annual plans, which work very well. I have seen 2 time a year planning cycles and compensation changes. I think it depends on the organization and the complexity of the organization. For example, in tech, we are moving very quickly right now. We're on, lots of innovation, lots of product shifts. You may need to have the autonomy to adjust your compensation plan more often than not, right? Um, However, there are other organizations and industries, for example, my prior industry, where it makes absolute sense to have an annual plan. Consistent, there's not mass changes in the industry where it could drive compensation impact. So I really think it depends on the industry of the organization or company, as well as the company too. If it's a fast ship company and things are changing all the time, that would impact quota, that would impact compensation. You may need to have a more flexible timeline to be able to adjust and adapt to the business needs sooner versus spiffs that may, not fully encompass the behaviors that you're trying to drive or outputs that you're trying to accomplish. And so I think it really just depends on the organization versus a one size fits all.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like there's always a tax that you have to pay the more frequently you make changes. And it's a kind of a balance of like, okay, well, how efficient can you be at doing this process? But no matter what, there's a human tax, the change management. Every time you make changes, new quotas, new cycles,
Yeah.
you have to get buy-in from the organization. And so you just have to be able to justify that price with the required agility.
Very spot on. It's a bigger lift when you're doing it more frequently, whether it's the enablement, the change management, new exhibits out to the team members, getting the buy-in tops down. You have to be very strategic with the cycling and planning of those compensation plans, working with your data team to get updated dashboards and the art of the possible. Can we even track these metrics that we're changing? Working with our product teams, for example, to gather the metadata if needed. So definitely more complexity, more resources needed for more frequent change, but sometimes it just makes more sense to do it
Yeah.
depending on the complexity of the business.
Yeah. So double clicking on the stakeholder side of it, and it is, I mean, again, like revenue ops, sales ops, and sales comp. The interesting thing is like you're actually serving so many different parts of the company. You have product that has an input. You have the, HR, legal, finance, sales, obviously. And as you think about every stakeholder has their most critical KPI, the most critical like objective that they want to accomplish, and their influence or potential influence on the incentive structures and the sales motions, the quotas, the territories. How do you bring that all together in a way that truly aligns to the outcome business needs, but managing all the stakeholder complexity that comes with everyone wants their thing.
That's a really great question. And I would say it starts from working backwards from the organizational goals. So, first, we need to understand what we're trying to deliver and what the output is that we're aiming to gain, and working backwards from there to put together options. So, I love to serve our leadership up with options around compensation first versus this is what I've built and this is what you're going to take to get. I think a diversity in thought and diversity in how these impact based on the different options provided and bring your stakeholders along on the journey. So some stakeholders may not come for the entire journey of all the way to shipping a compensation plan. However, I think frequent communication and at least giving them a place and a voice, but also looking for diverse perspectives on is there risk here or is this too
Yeah.
lucrative? We're going to, exceed this tremendously. Giving them a place to have that and voice that in the grand scheme of compensation planning is incredibly important because the last thing you want is to work in a vacuum. You create these compensation plans, ship them, and no one's aligned. So whether it's the sales team, stakeholders across the sales team, maybe your overlay teams that, feel that they don't have an impact on those metrics that you may be trying to drive, and most importantly, some of the leadership as well, like where did this come from versus showing up as a team, like we've all signed off on this. And sometimes you have to move faster, and those bringing the team along gets more complex and difficult. However, keeping awareness and communication with them is absolutely critical to landing any compensation plan.
Yeah, in terms of closing gaps that you didn't know existed, or I find sometimes like just information gaps. Like you may not know the direction that product is actually taking in the next 2 to 3 years if they're not a part of that, or um, the impact it's going to have on a bigger strategy or a separate strategy that is just missing from the mix. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and shift into our fun segment. And I'm wondering if it'd be great if you have a hot take in the world of sales ops, sales comp that you'd like to share.
My hot take is going to be around AI. So a lot around less around compensation at this point, but I would say more around just AI in general. Lots of questions around, is it hype? What's going on? I definitely think AI can be a force multiplier and productivity increase, but the hot take is unless your data hygiene is clean and ready for AI, don't do it yet. Get your framework and your foundation completed before you go and put AI on top, because otherwise it's just going to create slop, so to speak. But lots of ways to do that. And I think longer term, there's going to be significant impact and I'm speaking here on RevOps, by having hygienically clean data and by leveraging it in different modes, including AI, LLMs, to surface insights real time, excuse me, to sellers to maximize their compensation. I see a day where sellers will be very strategic, not that they're not today, but understanding where down to the penny they will be able to maximize their compensation plan by leveraging AI.
100%. It's interesting to me. 3, 4 years ago, you talk to the average sales ops leader, rev ops leader, and it was, we have way too much tool proliferation. We need to consolidate tools. And then all of a sudden now this AI enlightenment, because frankly, it's been around for a while, but like now that, the average consumer is aware, and all of a sudden now you have like this massive list of different tools and things that you can integrate. And it's like we dropped the whole like tool proliferation is not a it's not a bad thing anymore. It's actually, we're okay with this. But in reality, to your point, the outcomes really mimic how you've set up the architecture of your go-to-market motion. And yeah, I mean, this is again like I think it's a hot take, but at the same time, I think the leaders that are setting themselves up for success in the longer term are actually focused on getting the foundations right and then leveraging tools where they are.
And even hotter, I think let's just take sellers that leverage AI more will make more money long term.
Yes,
Those that can scale themselves and really apply their time and resources to the highest ROI areas of their business, customer portfolio, customer needs and asks, will
100%.
exponentially outperform those that do not.
100%. It's funny because I get asked, I'm like, you're in the business of, sales comp and sales performance management, and sales performance management is about a people problem. And it's like, oh, what if like sellers go away? And I fundamentally do not believe in that. Like if you think about this, you have two businesses side by side. One uses AI to cut their sales force by, 90% because one seller can do what 10 people can do. Margins go up temporarily. This company has the same number of reps. Instead of dropping 90%, their sellers are doing 10x
Mhm.
the amount of work per sales process. And now you've created the customer experience is not like 10 times better over here. And so I think margins are going to stay the same over time. You're going to see some companies lean on the efficiency, some companies lean on a better customer experience. This one's going to win 10 out of 10 times. And I think to me, there's an element of the best sellers are going to be the ones, I agree with you, that can replicate what they do to create the most outstanding customer sales motion, but at a scale that wouldn't be possible beforehand to every customer to create a very refined and individualized piece. And so, yeah, those that don't lean in, I think, are going to pay the price in the next, 5 to 10 years for sure.
I agree. I think there's massive opportunity ahead to
Yeah.
just make more money.
Yeah. On the data piece, and this is where uh, the element of not just throwing AI on top and expecting a better outcome. I'm curious if that's like a blank statement or like AI is good at getting, a directional outcome. So
Mhm.
if you have messy data and you want kind of direction, I actually think it's pretty functionally useful there. The danger, and maybe this is the delineation, the danger is if you need very accurate outcomes from that data, then you're going to get a bunch of AI slop because the last 5% is going to be really difficult if you don't have your data defined. So I guess I don't know, like, do you see a differentiation of where you use AI in your stack and go to market, where this is less important for accuracy versus very accurate?
So I use AI literally every day, and
Yeah,
not just no longer is it just like, oh, I'm going to ask a couple prompts and just have it do some email cleanup and things like that. It's very helpful for several other pieces. And so now more and more, I think the accuracy in general, where you leverage AI is very important. And let me give you a couple examples here. If, for example, revenue operations teams would like to use it for calculations, forward looking, forecasting, mapping, things like that, the underlying data has to be accurate because
yeah,
the impacts are is significant if it's not, right? Inaccurate forecasting and planning, compensation, all the things. So I think in general, a blanket statement is if you are going to use AI in your own ecosystem, it needs to have at least a really good base of hygienic data as it applies to revenue operations. Now, if you are just going to have AI, ask a insert model here, a question on, what's today's date, obviously you're going to quickly know that today's date is this date and that's right or wrong. But I think as we look for AI to take more complex prompts, it needs to be accurate. And with that accuracy requires a really hygienic data layer.
yeah, yeah, 100%. I guess has it changed the way that you've thought about recruiting and kind of building up your own teams within go-to-market?
I will tell you this. I'll actually take a different take on this.
Okay.
I have noticed a massive increase in AI leverage in interviews. So I am a very experienced interviewer and several hundred interviews I've conducted. And I'm now seeing when I hire team members,
Yeah.
AI use within the interviews. And so that's a little bit of a hot take and probably a different direction than what you were asking there. But not sure how I feel about it just yet. I think I have some opinions. It's good. I work, for an AI organization, love AI. I think it's, the next great advancement like computers were in cell phones and mobile computing. Um, However, it's interesting to see the different applications of it thus far.
Yeah. Someone who interviews as well, like a decent amount of people as well, I have absolutely seen the uptake of that. And I don't know, on the one hand, you're like, I want people that lean in on the best tooling possible. You're going to maximize the outcome, whatever you're doing. But on the other hand, it's like, I also want to see how you think, I want to say organically,
Yeah.
uh, and kind of execute within. And this is where it's funny because like for me, one of the big mandates is like we always want to interview someone at least once in person, and it's primarily because of that. It's like it's no different than going up for over a meal with someone in an interview process, getting a sense of like okay, how do they operate and and engage with people beyond just the person that's interviewing them is part of the kind of the assessment. But yeah, very fast evolving times, that is for sure. And I think, it certainly, I think will mean a lot of change for those that are in this career or just entering this career space, as the access to information is, just getting bigger and bigger every day, including because of doing things like this, where, you get to share your wisdom and your experience, with our audience and beyond. And so I want to wrap up here with that standard two questions that we ask every guest. And I'll start out with what's a resource, a podcast, something that has helped you in your career that you'd want to share with the audience?
Um, one of my most beloved books that I read years ago, and I reread it every so often, is Make Your Bed by retired General Admiral McRae. And he did the keynote speech at University of Texas several years ago and incorporated some of the elements from the book. It was viral for some time, but fantastic book around leadership, around, just all things that impact what you do. And so highly recommend it. It's a fantastic book, and it starts by making your bed each day.
You do the little things well, the big things take care of themselves.
That's exactly it. So you've obviously read that book.
Yeah, I would say there's a few different iterations and a few different books. They all that one calls it out specifically, but I think that philosophy is so true, like in everything you do in life. Second question is if there's someone in this industry that you'd like to take out to lunch, who would it be?
Okay, I'm going to go with a little bit of a twist here. I would say Bob Iger. So Bob Iger is the now recently retired CEO of Disney. I also read his book. And with that, Bob, I just think had a really great career transforming Disney. Disney is now what I would consider a tech company on many aspects. And I just would love to ask him several questions around, his journey across leadership and across Disney and the whole host of brands that Disney company covers. I think that would be a very interesting and fulfilling lunch.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, the transformation of what Disney was when when we were much younger to what it is today is pretty crazy. But I just want to again echo my message. I think I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and your fun anecdotes. None of this community would be possible without people like you coming on. So thank you again, and yeah, just what a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate the time with you.
The Sales Compensation Show is brought to you by Forma AI, the sales performance management platform that fully integrates sales planning with rapid, scalable incentive compensation management. Our data platform brings together how you can plan and manage the entire lifecycle of territories, quotas, and incentives. With global customers like Autodesk, Stryker, and Hootsuite, we enable go-to-market teams to plan and deploy even the most complex SPM strategies at speed, taking you from idea to execution instantly. To learn more about Forma AI, visit our website at forma.ai. Hit the subscribe button and find more episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.